37 seconds. That's how long it took for Laken Snelling to waive her preliminary hearing and disappear behind the closed doors of a grand jury system. 37 seconds to avoid answering the questions that have been haunting this case since a newborn baby was discovered wrapped in a trash bag inside her bedroom closet. The courtroom fell silent as she stood next to her attorney, said almost nothing, and walked away. Meanwhile, a full-term infant lies in a morgue with inconclusive stamped on his death certificate, and investigators are still trying to figure out whether he took his first breath or if someone took his last one away from him. This isn't just another tragic story about hidden pregnancies. This is about what happens when someone chooses silence over saving a life, and whether our justice system has the backbone to demand answers when those answers get uncomfortable. Before we dive into what really happened in that bedroom, I need you right here with me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because this case is about to get a lot more disturbing than you think. If you've been following our investigations, thank you for trusting us to dig where others won't. For newcomers, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, not just for us, but because these stories need to reach people who care about justice over comfort. We're building toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you helps ensure that cases like this don't get buried under legal technicalities and media silence. Your support means we keep investigating when others move on to easier stories. According to the arrest affidavit, Laken Snelling gave birth in her bedroom and initially told investigators she thought the baby wasn't alive. But then her story shifted. She claimed she passed out on top of the infant, and when she woke up, she noticed him turning blue and purple. Blue and purple. Those are the colors of life slipping away, of oxygen being cut off, of a newborn fighting for survival. What did she do when she saw her baby dying in front of her? Did she call 911? Did she scream for help? Did she perform CPR or try mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? No. She wrapped him in a towel, stuffed him into a trash bag, and hid him in her closet like he was garbage. Think about that sequence of events for a moment. You see your newborn child turning blue, the universal sign of oxygen deprivation, and your response is to hide the evidence rather than save the life. That's not panic. That's not fear. That's a conscious decision to let a baby die rather than face the consequences of his existence. The 911 call that finally brought this case to light wasn't even made by Snelling herself. Someone else discovered that tiny body in the closet, cold to the touch, and called authorities. By then, it was far too late for rescue, but just in time to start asking questions that Snelling clearly didn't want to answer. The coroner's office has listed the cause and manner of death as inconclusive, pending microscopic and toxicology results. But here's what we know for certain. This was a full-term baby. Full-term means developed lungs, fully formed organs, and the capacity for independent life. The question isn't whether he could have survived, it's whether someone prevented him from trying. Investigators seized Snelling's phone and are digging through her search history, deleted messages, and social media accounts. They're looking for the digital breadcrumbs that might explain what she was thinking before, during, and after giving birth. Did she research how to hide a pregnancy? Did she look up information about newborn care? Did she delete conversations with the baby's father about what to do? They're also waiting for DNA results from her former boyfriend to establish paternity. That DNA test isn't just about identification. It's about building a timeline of knowledge and responsibility. Did he know she was pregnant? Did they discuss options? Did he encourage her to hide the birth, or was he left in the dark until it was too late? Every deleted file, every erased search, every wiped conversation could be the piece that explains whether this was a moment of panic or months of planning. Because hiding a full-term pregnancy isn't something that happens overnight. It requires deliberate concealment, careful planning, and the kind of sustained deception that suggests this outcome might have been intentional from the beginning. That September 26th hearing lasted 37 seconds, but the implications will stretch for months. Instead of facing a preliminary hearing where evidence would have been presented publicly, where witnesses might have testified, where the community could have seen the strength of the case against her, Snelling chose to push everything behind the closed doors of a grand jury. Her attorney made that strategic decision for a reason. Grand jury proceedings are secret. No public testimony, no media coverage, no community oversight. Just prosecutors presenting their case to citizens who will decide whether to formally indict her on charges of concealing the birth of an infant, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. She walked out of that courtroom on a $100,000 bond, confined to her parents' home in White Pine, Tennessee, with electronic monitoring. For critics, that bond arrangement feels like justice delayed, if not denied. A newborn baby is dead, possibly killed, and the person accused of killing him gets to wait for trial in the comfort of her childhood bedroom. The investigation has expanded far beyond that closet where the baby was found. Detectives are reconstructing Snelling's relationships, her communications, her movements in the weeks and months leading up to the birth. They're particularly focused on her former boyfriend, the man who may have fathered the child that ended up in a trash bag. That DNA test represents more than just paternity. It represents accountability. If he's the father, questions follow about his role in the pregnancy, his knowledge of Snelling's condition, and whether he bears any responsibility for what happened to their child. Did he know she was planning to hide the birth? Did he offer to help with the baby? Did he pressure her to make the problem disappear? Friends and acquaintances described their relationship as complicated, with periods of conflict that might have influenced how the pregnancy was handled. Investigators are reviewing every text message, every phone call, every social media interaction between them, looking for evidence of conspiracy or abandonment that might have contributed to a newborn's death. The digital forensics could be devastating for Snelling's defense. Deleted searches about pregnancy concealment, erased messages about what to do with an unwanted baby, wiped conversations about hiding the birth. Any of these could transform the case from tragic accident to premeditated crime. But even if the father's DNA confirms paternity, even if the digital evidence suggests planning, even if every piece of forensic analysis points toward intentional harm, the most crucial question remains unanswered. Was that baby born alive? The preliminary autopsy came back inconclusive, forcing investigators to wait for microscopic and toxicology testing that could take weeks or months to complete. Those lab results will determine whether this case stays in the realm of tragic concealment or escalates to something much darker. If the baby was born alive, if he took independent breaths, if he showed signs of life before being wrapped in that towel and stuffed in that bag, then we're talking about homicide. If toxicology reveals evidence of suffocation, if microscopic analysis shows he was healthy enough to survive, if the forensic timeline proves he died after birth rather than during it, then Laken Snelling isn't just facing charges about concealing evidence. She's facing the possibility of murder charges for killing her own child. Legal experts are watching this case carefully because it touches on some of the most controversial intersections of law and morality in our justice system. How do we balance a woman's right to privacy with a newborn's right to life? How do we distinguish between tragic stillbirth and criminal homicide? How do we prosecute cases where the only witnesses are the accused and the victim can never testify? Defense attorneys will likely argue that Snelling was in shock, overwhelmed by the trauma of unexpected childbirth, acting irrationally due to medical and emotional distress. They'll paint her as a young woman who panicked and made terrible decisions in a moment of crisis, not a cold-blooded killer who planned to murder her baby. Prosecutors will counter that her actions after the birth, the careful wrapping, the deliberate concealment, the sustained silence, demonstrate consciousness of guilt and premeditation. They'll argue that someone who was truly in shock wouldn't have had the presence of mind to clean up the scene and hide the evidence so methodically. The grand jury will have to weigh those competing narratives against the physical evidence, the digital footprint, and the forensic analysis that's still pending. Their decision about whether to indict and on what charges will set the tone for a trial that could define how our society handles cases where maternal responsibility collides with criminal accountability. But here's what bothers me most about this entire case: the silence that surrounds it. A full-term baby is dead, possibly murdered, and the response from our community and our media has been muted, careful, almost apologetic. We're tiptoeing around the brutal reality that someone may have killed a newborn rather than seeking help, and we're treating it like a private family matter rather than a public tragedy. That baby had no voice, no advocate, no one to speak for his right to live. He exists now only in forensic reports and legal documents, reduced to evidence in a case that might never fully acknowledge the life that was lost. Whether he lived for minutes or hours or was never given the chance to breathe at all, he deserved better than being stuffed in a trash bag and hidden away like a shameful secret. The questions that haunt this case aren't just about legal technicalities or forensic timelines. They're about the values we hold as a society, the protection we offer to the most vulnerable, and the accountability we demand when that protection fails. If Laken Snelling is guilty of what prosecutors suggest, then justice demands consequences that match the gravity of her actions. If she's innocent of intentional harm, if this was truly a moment of panic and poor judgment, then the system needs to acknowledge that reality while still holding her accountable for the choices she made after her baby's death. What we can't do is let this case fade into legal obscurity, buried under grand jury secrecy and media discomfort with difficult moral questions. That baby's life, however brief, deserves recognition. His death, whatever the circumstances, deserves investigation. And our community deserves answers about what really happened in that bedroom. The microscopic and toxicology results will provide crucial pieces of the puzzle, but they won't answer the deeper questions about responsibility, prevention, and justice that this case raises. Those answers have to come from us, from a community that refuses to look away when children die, from a justice system that prioritizes truth over convenience, and from a society that values life enough to demand accountability when it's taken away. So I'm asking you directly, what do you think really happened that night? Do you believe Snelling's story about passing out and finding the baby unresponsive? Or do you think she made a deliberate decision to let her child die rather than seek help? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. These conversations matter because they shape how we respond to cases like this one. If this investigation opened your eyes to the complexities of this case, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We need to keep following this story through the grand jury process, through potential trial, through whatever resolution our justice system eventually provides. Every subscriber helps ensure these difficult stories get the attention they deserve, even when they make us uncomfortable. The truth about what happened to that baby is still emerging, piece by piece, through forensic analysis and legal proceedings that could take months to resolve. But one thing is already clear: this case will test whether our system has the courage to seek justice for a victim who can never speak for himself, and whether our community has the moral clarity to demand answers even when those answers challenge our assumptions about motherhood, responsibility, and the value of life itself. 37 seconds was all it took to push this case behind closed doors. But the questions it raises will echo long after the grand jury makes its decision and the headlines move on to easier stories. Because at the heart of this case lies a fundamental question that our society must answer: what do we owe to the children who depend on us for protection, and what happens when that protection fails? The investigation continues. The questions remain. And somewhere in the silence, a newborn's voice still waits for justice.